Welcome everybody to the call. And as I like to typically do in the beginning, I'd like to take a roll call by asking people to indicate their name and company they represent. So I'm not sure if the order I see of names is the same as what everyone else sees. So I'll just call the name out, and if you could acknowledge, I see Dan Bell listed first. So Dan.
Yeah, hi, good morning, everyone. This is Dan Bell. I'm here representing Marken.
Okay, thank you. I see Christopher Jacks.
Good morning, afternoon, everybody, wherever you're at. Christopher Jacks, Director of Supply Chain for Catalent in our clinical packaging business.
Okay, welcome. There's a Bill. I don't see the last name.
Hey, this is Bill Kapler. How are you doing, Bill? Bill Kapler with World Courier.
Morning. Diana Vasquez.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon. Diana Vasquez, Head of Supply Chain Appliance Therapeutics.
Okay, the orders keep changing here, but Richard Nelson.
Hey everybody, I'm Rich Nelson. I'm the Associate Director of Clinical Supply Distribution for Exelexis.
Thanks for joining, Richard. Sasha.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Sascha Sonnenberg, heading Global Business Development at Sanaclis.
Thomas.
Yes, hi, good morning, everybody. Sorry, I cannot put on my video. I have not such a stable connection at the moment. Yes, responsible for warehousing and distribution, global clinical supply at Novartis Pharmaceuticals.
Okay, thank you for joining, and for you, good evening, I believe.
Yeah, so.
Yes. Ashley.
Ashley Lasher, I'm Associate Director at Fibergen for clinical supplies.
Okay, welcome, Ashley. Damien.
Hi all. Damien Protzak, Senior Director of Global Operations for Inceptua.
Thank you. Dana.
Hi, everyone. Dana Granado. I'm a Logistics and Inventory Management Analyst at ADC Therapeutics.
Welcome. Let me see, did I miss anybody here?
Hi, Bill. This is Sonia.
Oh, yeah.
Sure, go ahead. Hello, good evening,
hello.
Good morning to everyone. So Senior Manager with Global Trade Compliance with BioMarine Pharmaceuticals.
Okay, great. Thanks. Is there anybody else? Okay, I know a couple more might be joining late, but we'll get started. So there's two primary topics for today's agenda. The first is would like to solicit some feedback on the annual conference that we had last month. And the second is I prepared a poll seeking your feedback on topics for future webinars or group discussions. As most of you might know, one of the purposes of this Workstream group is to have calls where we can dedicate a certain amount of time to allow those of you who are interested in learning more about a topic, identifying a challenge that they're working on back at the office or whatever the case may be, to use this forum to describe the challenge and seek feedback from others on the call as to how they may have dealt with the problem back in their current job or prior jobs that they may have been in. So we continue to want to do that, but I've found that while we can and we will allow people to be sort of random in the call in identifying those topics, that we will also plant some seeds for some of these future meetings by identifying in advance some of the topics that we have, so that hopefully when you know what these topics are, it might get you more interested in participating in the call, or even reaching out to others within your organization that might be responsible for that particular area, so that they can listen and share their thoughts and opinions on that. So going back to the first topic, I'd like to go around and for those of you who attended the conference, tell me what you liked and what we could do better next time. And Dan, I'm going to start with you because I think we started to briefly talk about it at the conference, but time didn't allow us to continue the conversation.
Yeah, I think I think the format works, right? But one of the things that impressed me about the way it was structured was that we managed to engage, well over 80% of the participants, right? That room was full most of the time for each of the different topics. I was a bit concerned that they all had more or less the same format, a kind of plenary with some pre-organized questions, but it seemed to work, or at least to keep people engaged. I think there's probably an opportunity to do some pre-work that isn't just on the panel, right? Thinking up what they want to talk about and what the questions are. I think you could have some folks come to the event with some challenges, perhaps, or there's another way I think that we could engage people prior to the event. But overall, I was impressed, and people asked, kind of questions that we hear fairly often, but they were good, challenging questions that I think multiple people could relate to. Yeah, I was quietly impressed actually with the format. So that's my feedback.
Good. One quick question back to you on that. Clearly, day one was different from day two. Day one was plenary sessions, a lot of prepared speeches. Day two was more around panel discussions. Do you think that the day two format being panel discussions, entirely panel discussions, was the way to go, or do you think there should be some sprinkling of the other?
Yeah, I think for day two, we probably could have mixed it up, maybe just something a little bit different. I mean, the afternoons, I was impressed that people were still there. We had the last session right at the end of day two, and I was impressed that people were still there. So keeping an engagement to make sure people get something from the event itself was important. So I think, we could probably sprinkle something else in there as well for day two.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Diane, I know you were at the event. Thoughts?
Yes, I was, and I agree with Dan. I like the format. I know that it was the last one, and I think it was very productive and very engaging. I always think probably kind of giving an open forum time slot so people can come, like they say, bring talk about anything or ask anything kind of thing. And it's not kind of as probably as scripted, as more kind of impromptu. And I think probably gives people freedom to continue to ask and kind of dive into different topics as well.
Yeah, I like that idea. Okay. Sonia, I know you were there.
Yeah, so I agree too with the format and that, Dan was mentioning, and Diana touched on something that I noticed. So when we have the panel discussions, there were quite a bit of questions. Some of them maybe had more than others, but then I always think, all those people who had the questions that were not answered, can we then follow up with that? If they did not have the opportunity to ask the questions, and there were some were answered, but the other ones were, we were running out of time, and then provide that service, right? They had questions, we might not been able to get to them, but maybe have someone, go and ask those people, can you write your questions? I know there were that option for the in the app, but I think maybe we didn't utilize it as much as maybe we could have used it. I just want to think, if people have questions, what can we do better to answer those questions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point.
That will be my feedback.
Okay, thank you. Sasha.
Yes, we already spoke briefly about the event, and I can only concur with what Dan, Deanna, and also Sonia said. What I believe we can do better is probably bring in a different mix of the sessions so that it is not all like a plenary discussion. Maybe we can even think about some roundtables. It would link to what Dan said with people could think about certain topics, and we could probably do it on day one and then address some of the outcome of the working groups or roundtables on day two as a summary and follow up in the steering committees or work groups on some of the topics, because they could also give us a good idea for future webinars and topics that are of interest to the industry and to the future audience of BSMA. The other part is I think we need to check on how we set up the panels. Most of the panels had a good balance between vendors and participants from the pharma/biotech side. But we spoke about it. There was one panel where I think it was vendor heavy, and it didn't really fit with the actual topic, talking about innovation in the supply chain. It was like some of the stuff, it was like, yeah, we had this since like 10, if not 15 years. So checking on the content and also on the mix of the speakers that are participating in the panel, I think is important as well to assure quality.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point too. Okay. Christopher.
Yeah, I mean, I echo everybody's comments. One thing that stood out to me, there was more meat on the bone in the sessions. It was less sales pitchy, if that makes sense. Sometimes these become a little sales pitchy. I really did enjoy the GDP, good distribution practice discussion. I think it kind of opened at least some people's eyes from our business on how that impacts not just commercial, but clinical, which I thought was cool. Things to maybe improve on. I love the app. It'd be cool to try to get that a little bit more integrated. I mean, there was only 2 polls. And I always like to kind of see those because, it's anonymous a little bit and you really get a good judge on what people are feeling. Be cool to see if we can kind of integrate that into the presentations where maybe there's questions asked to the audience, they go into the app, they answer it from a poll standpoint, and that can kind of steer some of the discussions too. I've seen that in past conferences and it's kind of neat. So overall though, excellent job, good engagement, and I think really good topics too.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And I know after we did introductions, we had another person join. Tony Smith.
Hi, Bill. Sorry, I joined a few minutes late, but
no problem.
Again, enjoyed the conference immensely. I did give feedback there when a gentleman was coming around and interviewing or paneling thoughts, and I echo everyone's sentiments about the roundtable discussion. I think, we have a lot of folks coming from different areas of the logistics realm, and it would be helpful for them to get those conversations going in a smaller, more intimate setting than just the panels. But I very much enjoyed the conversation that did come from those discussions as well. So that was my feedback, just, a little bit of breakout sessions and, giving people a chance to ask questions in a smaller group setting and just kind of walk through best practices and things that are going on, in our day-to-day lives that we're having trouble kind of, sussing out on our own.
Yeah, agreed. And if I recall correctly, Tony, you asked a question which I sort of jumped on because I liked it so much. And it was related to some of the challenges that may not apply to a number of the larger companies, but for the smaller companies where somebody's wearing multiple hats. You don't always have all the experience and subject matter expertise on site, and you don't know what you don't know, and you often have to rely on your service providers. And I was trying to draw that out of the panels and the audience because I think that they were sort of the silent majority out in the room. And I'm not sure if we hit the bullseye in all the topics that we had there. But I'm interested, Tony, in your thoughts, or anyone else on the call's thoughts about whether we did enough to help the companies that really need the assistance and expertise of the people who are of the companies there that have more mature processes, and just again wanted to know what other people's thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think there was that feeling, and I think a lot of folks stayed quiet that are in those scenarios, wearing those different hats. I think I chimed into somebody else's question about that because I hail from Thermo Fisher Scientific. We're a larger company. We had resources. We had global trade compliance. Now that I'm at Arcus, I'm global trade compliance. I'm the one that's, questioning valuation as it comes in from finance. I'm the one looking at harmonized tariff codes. I have one employee under me that comes from Dicerna who had, people to ask, people to go to, and, the level of comfort's just not there. And I said, just take a step back. Anything you do not feel comfortable answering, do not answer. And, either I'll be able to answer it for you or we seek resources, right? Your company's going to have a legal team. So I went to my legal team with a customs inquiry recently that one of our scientists, sent a shipment, put us under the preferential tariff. And now we had to prove that that material, really was manufactured in Canada because we would have owed $85,000 in taxes. So, we're all going, oh my God, we're going to lose our license to import export. I said, time out, let's involve legal. We have access to outside counsel. So, some of those companies, you just have to know who to go to. Because I feel like there's that, when you're like, oh my God, I'm it. What if I make the wrong thing? What if I make the wrong decision? But leverage your resources, leverage your peers in the industry with, as long as it's not, breaking any proprietary information. Rich Nelson and I, for example, have known each other for years. He'll text me sometimes like, hey, Tony, can you help me out with this? So that's what I really feel like those smaller companies, and this is a great forum, right? This is what this forum's for. Ask the questions, bring them to these meetings. So I think the smaller companies definitely could benefit from that more intimate setting because I feel like they're overwhelmed with information and going, oh God, we don't have this. This doesn't exist, in my company. And what do I do?
Yeah. all good points. Yeah, so thanks for sharing that. Bill Kapler, I think you were obviously there, being on a panel. Any comments, good or bad, from your perspective about the conference?
No bad. It was my first conference, BSMA conference, and probably some of you heard. Also, my first opportunity to participate in a panel. Agree with the previous comments as far as the conference is concerned. I found the range of topics very informative. I like the format. So really nothing to add. And from a that hasn't already been said. And then from a panelist standpoint, appreciate the prep work and how we socialized together and we talked about topics and made sure that the panelists were both comfortable, but also that the information we were going to share was going to be relevant and pertain to the audience. So overall, it was a very positive experience for myself.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bill. And I think the rest of you on the call, correct me if I'm wrong, were unable to attend. So unless I'm wrong there, I'll move to the next topic.
I'll just chime in quickly. For me, day 2 rang a lot truer or in line, I think, with what I was seeking. I think day 1 felt a little more existential in some ways, right? There were much higher level topics, sometimes a little harder to apply to the day-to-day. It was good to hear. It was nice to think about. It was more of a thought exercise for me, day 1, and then day 2 was all right. Here's the nuts and bolts, practical questions.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's typically by design, that they've always had the plenary session day 1, and that's primarily meant to appeal to, let's call it the executive VPs of the larger companies in particular. And I'd like to think that the topics on day 1 are more strategical, help people as they develop a business plan or a roadmap of where they want the organization to go. And day 2 is more about the toolbox. You know, how do I solve this week's problems? And so I think it works that way. But if anybody thinks that both days should be more like day 2, then certainly we'll take that into perspective. I personally like day 2 better because that was the day I was responsible for organizing.
I think it was more interactive on day 2. And as I mentioned earlier, I think for like an opening panel to the event, the day 1 format is okay, but not for the entire day. If we then can build in like these roundtable discussions and follow up on the second day, which is obviously more work for the panels, but I think it would add value to the conference, and it would make us being even closer to the attendees and to their challenges and questions they have.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I am before I share this poll that I'm going to ask people to share their opinion on, I'm going to describe what they are, because in some ways what I typed in the poll may not have adequate description behind them. So I'm going to describe them, and knowing that many of these can be are broad, get people to comment on and say, well, that's might be okay, but why don't you think about adding this to it, or make it specific to that, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to just describe the 8 that are on the poll, ask people to just let me know your thoughts on it, and then I will send out the poll for everybody to vote on. So the first one that you'll see is building a trade compliance program. I think the description of that is adequate, but I frankly have never been involved in building a trade compliance program. Don't know if that's a topic that people are interested in. Don't know how many of you have already done it. So I'll pause for a minute and just ask for people to share their thoughts on that topic, what you think the scope of it should be, and move on from there. So starting with that one, does anybody on the call have a trade compliance program?
Hi, Bill. Oh, I don't know if someone was going to jump on it, but definitely. And that's why I was referring to the questions that were asked. And so I think that will be a really good topic. It seemed that there were a lot of questions because it's kind of like the unknown component within, global supply chain that everybody knows about transportation, but there are customs obviously involved. And that even to give them the framework at a very high level, but give them the guidance and some structure of what they should be focused on. I think it will bring value to the group, to the BSMA. I think so.
I know,
and
that
I do have
person
experience.
who expressed a lot of eagerness on this topic and actually would like to help organize a group to do one, or at least, and if not a conversation on one, maybe a webinar on one. But just out of curiosity, is there anybody else on the call who already has such a program?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do. I think anybody involved in transport in a larger company has either had to build one, augment one, refine one. I know, I speak for myself, that we've had to do that.
Same.
I can agree as well.
Okay. Well, yesterday there was one person I spoke with who really was eager to do it, which implied to me he didn't have one, and that gentleman was from Bayer. So it sounds like not every big company has one.
So
no, Tim, I think the problem is the same as we in Novartis. So of course we have one, but when you are a big company, it's hard to transmit it to everyone. So we created then a training program and for awareness, for global awareness, and that was really important to do so. So that's exactly a typical thing. They even don't know that you have it in the big companies, and to let them know that you have it and where they can go to ask the right question. I think that's very important.
Okay, thank you.
And Bill, you said the guy you talked to yesterday or a few days ago was from Bayer and did not have it?
So it sounded, yes.
Okay, but isn't the one of the guys that was on the panel from Bayer that was?
And that's the person I spoke with.
Yeah, I would be surprised if they don't have one, because I at least know two people who have in their title trade compliance from Bayer. But I think we're not looking at the big companies. Yeah, as mentioned, most of them have their programs and they have the resources. But we did a poll for our panel who has an internal trade compliance, and it wasn't a breakdown by company, but at least by delegate. And at least there was, I would say, like 1/3 not having a trade compliance team. And the majorities of companies we see on the West Coast are small biotech companies. And we spoke to one of the attendees, and she said, well, I wear this hat, beside I'm wearing also the trade compliance hat, and I have actually no clue of what needs to be included. I'm totally dependent from my vendors, and I don't have full oversight of what is needed and if everybody is compliant. So I think developing maybe not the full-blown program, because that might need to be adapted to the size of the organization, but like a table of content, what are essential elements of trade compliance. And then for smaller companies, maybe checklists. What do you need to be aware of? What do you need to take into consideration? Of course, you can spin this further, and probably in 10, 20 years, we would still have stuff to work on. But I think it will be very helpful, especially for small and even medium-sized companies, to get a better oversight and understanding of what trade compliance means. Not just talking about GDP, but also the different import requirements on a global basis. I know that many companies have their own like little database or word cheat sheets about importing into different countries. And probably Dan will agree, the IOR topic on a global basis is a topic where the learning curve is very low and is always coming up. So for me, IOR, the whole question about what does the QP do in regards to importing material into Israel, EU, UK, I think these are topics that are very important, and I see a lot of value add for the conference to discuss them, but also in general for the industry.
Okay, thank
So
you.
if I could, I'm on the receiving end of what Sasha has just mentioned. We are a small service provider shipping into very rare countries, if we could call them that, and we are currently in the process of setting up a proper compliance mechanism within the company. But the question of IOR and the responsibilities and who should get involved and where, I think would be very beneficial.
Okay, great. So that's good to hear. Now, I prepared 8 questions for the poll, and that was the first one. The last one, I don't know, is redundant to this. I didn't think it was, but maybe it's just my lack of familiarity with this subject matter. What I described it as is a shipping instruction manual into a logistics guide. And my description of that is basically a manual that you give to your suppliers or service providers that basically says, here's how I expect you to ship it. This is, if it comes on a pallet, this is the size pallet. This is how I expect it shrink wrapped. I expect that the paperwork will look like this or include this information. I expect you to use these shipping lanes or whatever the case may be. Is that this manual, as I just described it, part of a trade compliance program, or is it separate, as which is what I think it would be?
I think trade is an element of that, Bill. That sounds like a expanded shipper's letter of instruction, right? That
Yeah,
includes
exactly.
a trade element, right? Because you also have GDP, cold chain, a whole bunch of stuff in there besides trade. So it would just be an element of it, I would think. My 2 cents.
So it's a separate topic, is what you're saying? It would not be part of the topic about building a trade compliance program?
I know.
Yeah, we see it as well as a separate topic, absolutely.
Right, okay.
I was going to say, for me, I imagine a pyramid and trade compliance is at the top, and those instructions would be built for the bottom.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Another topic I put in the poll, but is probably the vaguest of the ones on the list, is risk. And by that I was trying to mean, what are the what are some of the common risks that people in global logistics and trade compliance are dealing with, and what can they do to help minimize those risks? So again, not worded very clearly, but if you sort of get the get the gist of what I'm saying, that will be another question on the toll. Again, not sure, since it's so broad the way I've put it, whether it needs to be more clearly defined.
Well, it's a key part of any compliance program, trade being the one we're talking about. I think you could probably word it a little bit differently, Bill, but yeah, it's absolutely a poll question is, what risk factors, are impacted by your trade program or whatever. You probably think of a different way to word it, but yeah, it's got to be in there, right?
Yeah.
And I think what's important as well, we're talking about commercial as well as clinical supply chain. The risks are different, and also the way we look at, I think we discussed the difference between qualifying and validating lanes or packaging solutions, who is involved in the setup. I mean, when we talk about clinical, the risk starts probably with clinical operations, selecting a strange country to conduct the trial in. But I think that's something that needs to be considered as well.
Okay. Next one again is too vague the way I wrote it, but it should be considered, I think, is cold chain. And again, it could be anything, something as specific as, how you ship your cold chain products, or temp till, best practices, whatever the case may be. Next topic is staying on top of world affairs. And again, the way I worded it is probably too vague, but the intent is that with the situation in parts of the world, whether it be what's going on in Israel, what's going on in the Ukraine, what's going on in China or Korea, that how do you stay on top of it, and how do you apply that information to ensure your product gets to where it needs to be when it needs to be there. Another topic I put is I know that for cold chain, people typically choose, depending on the product, either a -20, -60 to 80, or the -130 for liquid nitrogen. And I don't know how common it is for those of you out there. Sonia, I know that you're probably aware that some of the gene therapy products have some very unique temperature requirements. When I was there, when we were doing clinical studies on our first gene therapy product, the temperature requirement was -55 ±3. Had no idea how we were going to handle that. And when we reached out to our service providers, they were scratching their heads as well. So don't know if that is that type of situation is becoming more and more common. So again, in the poll, we'll be asking you, is this a topic that you think might be of interest or not? The next one on there, just to describe again what it means when you see it on the poll, is depot selection and optimization. As most of you know, the majority of biopharma, biotech companies, rely on a distributor for, typically the US and Europe are relatively easy to do. But when it comes to countries in South America, Middle East, Russia, Ukraine, Asia Pacific, they need to decide whether they want to do a drop shipment directly to the patient site or want to use a depot. And then all these other questions and challenges need to be decided. You know, when should I use a depot? And now I need to store that in a freezer. Why is it that I need 3 months in order to get a freezer? And how do I deal with the validation of it? What do I do if that freezer breaks down? Does that mean I need 2 freezers there? One is a backup. And if I only have 1 patient in that site and only need 1 shelf in that freezer, why do I need my own freezer?
No, the question is, why did your clinical operations team selected a country where you need 1 additional depot for 1 patient? That's not sustainable.
That's a great question, and not to digress too much, but I used to always question the clinical team on that. Why are you letting the clinical team open up in these South American countries if they only predict 1 or 2 patients? And oftentimes they say, hey, we have to do what they say. And all I could do is say, well, do you realize it's going to cost over $100,000 to open up that depot? And they say, so what? Just do it. But anyway, that's another topic that is on the poll. Are those problems that I described common enough for us to have a session on that? Next is how to ensure your clinical distributor has your back. For those 50 to 80% of the BSMA members who don't have a logistics department, don't know what they don't know, they're relying on these distributors to store it, ship it, figure out how it's going to get cleared, do the paperwork, and how do they know? How can these companies know that these companies that are doing this for them are doing it in the right way? So I'm going to jump right to the poll now, just because I don't want to run out of time and not get folks to do this part of it. So if I go to the poll. Okay, can people see the poll?
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna wait 5 minutes and have you go through it. There's 9 questions. 8 allow you to put very interested, somewhat interested, not interested. And the 9th question is basically just for you to type in any other topics that you think might be of interest. And hopefully, since I spent, a few minutes describing what the topics were, it's clear enough for you to kind of get the gist of what we're talking about, notwithstanding that I'm sure at a future date, we will more clearly define the scope of what these ought to be. All right, wait a couple more. And by the way, Jeff Bernia, welcome to the call, and Charles.
Hey, Bill, everybody. Sorry, I was late.
Yeah, no problem. Just wanted to acknowledge.
Hey, Bill,
that
thanks.
you joined. Okay.
Hey, Bill, thanks. I was glad I was able to finally make it. Had a conflict earlier.
Okay, maybe one more minute. I see, I think there's 3 more people. If you are not sure if you're online and able to respond. Okay, anybody need more time? Okay, I'm gonna end it. Okay, can people see what the results are?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. It looks like the trade compliance program and the risk came in pretty high. There's a lot more that are in the middle box of somewhat interested than I sort of expected. I figured people would either be interested or not interested, but there's a lot of ones in the middle here, but it is what it is. And I don't know if all of you were able to figure out how to read the answers to the last question. I just double clicked on it, and I see there was 3 suggestions. One indicated receiving products for clinical research under DSCSA.
Didn't even see that one.
Yeah. Not sure what that means. Is the person online who?
Yeah, so it was me who entered that in. So that stands for Drug Supply Chain Security Act, which should have gone into effect November 27th of last year. We are right now in a period called the stabilization period, and basically there is no enforcement until the November 27th of this year. And most of it has to do with the commercial distribution and returns of sellable units back to the marketing authorization holders. But what has not been yet clarified by the FDA is how receiving of the product for clinical trials is being viewed. There is a guidance document that stipulates that a sponsor is basically looked at as a consumer, so that the last step before the distribution would be considered dispensation, but there really isn't a standard interpretation. And I see, speaking to pharma companies, that no one really has the proper understanding, or everyone has their own interpretation.
Okay, yeah, that's very helpful. As a matter of fact, somebody asked for that topic to be put on the steering committee call, because I think it's a topic that goes beyond logistics, from what I could gather. The other topic here was understanding the meaning and responsibility of the import-export of record, qualified person, etc. And the third and last one was managing the importer of record and associated compliance liabilities. Is there a difference between the second and the third, or is there a way to merge those two topics?
No, they should go together, Bill. Obviously, if you have two different people writing them, I wrote one of them. There's enough people asking about it that there's interest, so they can go together.
Okay. Okay. All right, so thanks everybody for your input there. Are there any? We'll take that list and use it for determining topics for our future Workstream group meetings, and maybe if there's a webinar or two that this group wants to host this year, we can do that as well. So with that said, if any of you are interested in helping facilitate a call on any of those topics, email me after this call, and then we can have a discussion on how and when we can make that happen.
Can you share the list of the topics? Maybe in a separate email.
Yeah, and you're saying the 8 that are you able to see them on the screen right now?
No.
Can anybody see them?
You have to click into the polls icon, polls and quizzes, and then it'll pop up.
Okay.
If you've closed
So
it already.
what I'll do is this: is that within the week, I will share the polls and the recording of today's call for everybody who might be interested in either or. Okay. Any other comments, questions before we end the call?
No, just that I know there's some chat going on, and it was for the customs broker license versus the CCS certification. I would highly recommend, if you're gonna spend the time and effort study for the customs broker license, you will get more for the investment of time and money rather than the CCS, which you can grandfather yourself when you obtain the customs broker license. And unfortunately, as of 2024 now, we are required to maintain our license by 36 hours of continuing education credits within 3 years. Just to add that to the chat that we were having.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Sorry, I sent it somewhere. It was in context when we were talking about the trade compliance program and it didn't reach the group. I apologize, but no, thank you for that feedback. One of my employees was looking to, just gain some more insight on like classification and stuff. She came upon this. I said, before we sign up, let me pull BSMA and see if anyone's taken it or has attended anything else other than a conference like this or a certification like this or the broker's license. So thank you very much for your feedback.
I can follow up and give you some recommendations if it's only for classification.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind giving
Yeah.
me some options. She doesn't feel quite as comfortable in that area. Came upon this. I
Yeah.
didn't think it was something we necessarily needed like right now without the broker's license, but that'd be great,
Yeah.
Sonia. I'd appreciate it.
Definitely. I'll send you a few suggestions.
Awesome.
I had a
Okay.
question, Sonia. Anybody who had previously received their broker's customs licenses grandfathered into that, or do they still have to do the 36 hours? I haven't been updated, sorry.
So,
Well, go ahead, Sonia.
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say that there's two elements here. One is, of course, being grandfathered in to become a certified specialist through the National Association. That's one part. But there's actually now a new requirement, which I think both of us have posted links in, that in order to kind of re-up on your triennius, which is a thing you have to do every 3 years to maintain your license, you have to have continuing education credits. And you can obtain many of those through the National Association, which includes taking some of those courses and attending their conferences. So there's kind of two elements to it. But I think for smaller companies that are, really looking on a specific area, whether it's, valuation or something else, there are loads of great programs out there that you can do separately. But there's two elements to that question. Yes, you can get grandfathered in, but yes, you also have to do the credits.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, good stuff. All right, so if that's it for today's call, again, I want to thank everybody for calling in, for sharing your comments, and I'll be sharing this information, as I said, no later than next week. So again, have a good rest of the day. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Take care.
And
Bye.
you, bye.
Thank you. Bye.